What if everything that Big Pharma told you about migraines is a lie? Now, given approximately a quarter of the population experiences migraines, this story is very likely to affect you or someone you love. Dr. Angela Stanton is a neuroscientist who wrote this groundbreaking book. She says migraines are not a disease. They come from having a prehistoric brain that is just not adapted to the modern world. So things like artificial light, noise population, constant access to carbohydrates and sugar. But migraineurs have superpowers because they are so sensitive to those things. They can better hear, see in the dark, taste and smell better than non-migraineurs. So almost super protectors. I found her book while researching this for my son, and he is super excited because now he thinks he's Daredevil, the superhero with super senses. She says modern pharmaceuticals are no help to migraineurs, and she has her own protocol called the Stanton Migraine Protocol. When I read this book, I thought more people need to know about this. So I invited her on the show, and she joins us today. So thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Stanton.
Thank you for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.
So did I get that right? My summary of your main conclusion is that migraineurs are actually super protectors, but the modern world is hard on them.
You totally got that right, with a little bit of a variation in that it's very specific usually to females. And that has an evolutionary origin as well, as you probably read in my book, because if you look back at humans as hunter-gatherers, while the adult males were always out hunting. And if I'm a lion or a tiger and I want to attack somebody, I'm not going to attack a group of men carrying weapons. That's just normal. So their sensory organs develop differently. They're after the chase, whereas the women and the children stayed at home. And they would be gathering, squatting. And so they were the obvious targets. So the sensory organs that develop between male and female and children, by the way, are different in a way that if I'm a woman, I will listen to all the noises. I will have extraordinary ability to smell because I want to know the animal that is hiding and ready to pounce on me. My vision is probably going to be better, but not necessarily direct vision, but the peripheral vision is going to be better. So I can see things moving whereas nobody else would. And so these are the kind of sensory organs that are better, but they're more specific to women, except for children who are still in a category of staying at home. Now, once they move with the men in terms of boys who sort of kind of pass puberty, and then they grow up and they join the boys, their sensory organs tend to taper back down because at that point, they no longer need those same strong sensory organs. So that's why you see that before puberty, more boys have migraines, but after puberty, it's more girls, and female is a predominant migraineur today.
So something you said is that the migraine brain has a higher voltage, is more attuned to these types of things, and so it needs more electrolytes. Now, this is really the secret to your protocol is constant manage of your electrolytes. And it's not just drinking a Gatorade. It's a little bit more intense than that, but it is things that are readily available like salt and milk. And so these are things that the prehistoric man would have had access to with unfiltered water and streams and things like that, right? Can you expound on that?
Sure. Well, first of all, there are two sources of salt, and most of those are ignored. One is water, obviously. Before all this purification, there is no water without salt. It's all brackish salt. Even the purest of lake waters or creeks or rivers will be salted. It's going to be brackish to some degree, except for perhaps the very purest in the Antarctica and the Arctic regions where the rain is falling or the snow is melting for about 2 minutes. But once they hit sand or rocks, the salt is in them. So but the bigger source of salt, which we totally ignore, is that prior to modern civilization, meat wasn't hung for days and days to let all the blood out. And if you look back, even in tribes today who still eat in an ancestral way, the first thing that they do is they drink the blood. I mean, we have Maasai tribes, you can see them all over on video, film, everywhere. They still drink the blood. They actually bleed the cow alive just a little bit, a couple of cups of blood, and then they close the wound and let the cow go. It's highly nutritious. It's full of salt. So there's your salt supply right there.
Yeah.
So in our blood, there is a tremendous amount of salt. If you
So
ever
you're
go
not
to
saying
the,
we need to go drink blood. You're saying that migraineurs need to supplement with salt. I just want to make that clear. This is not a
exactly, and
ritualistic
I think that
protocol.
everybody should, and everybody
Right.
should. To be honest, to be fair, but the migraineurs need more because. But you said earlier that the brain is has more energy need. It's because there's more neuronal connections between the sensory neurons, and so there's a lot more firing happening in the brain. A lot more work is being done because of the hypersensory neurons. So the amount of information coming in, and this may explain how this works. If a person who is not a migraineur and a person who is together, they head into a room, and the room is the same in all sides, right? It's a certain light, certain sound, certain smell, temperature, whatever. The person who's not a migraineur will just notice everything is fine. From the very same stimulus, the migraineur may get a migraine because the light may be too strong, the sound may be too loud, the odor may be too strong. So our sensory organs take up everything in a larger dose. It's not that we
Now,
are sensitive to stronger, but we're sensitive in general.
right. Yeah. It's not a weakness. It's a strength. I
It's
love
a
this
strength.
reframing of
It's a
it.
strength.
Yeah.
Right.
And so you talk about learning to balance your electrolytes, which are sodium, potassium, magnesium, and calcium. And when my son, he gave me permission to say this on the air, when we looked at his blood work when he was hospitalized for a migraine, those were the areas that he was low, but his glucose levels were high, exactly as you said would lead to a migraine. You also say, and this is so wild, that migraineurs are more likely to suffer on the full moon, which is when humans would have been susceptible to predators. And he was hospitalized on the full moon. So all of this checks out. It's so wild, right?
It's totally wild, but it makes a lot of sense if you look at it from an evolutionary perspective. And definitely a full moon and any kind of a time of the year when we may be more susceptible for predation. So it could be the longer summer days when the sun is up for longer and the night is shorter. Some places there's no dark at all at night. So there's seasonality also involved here.
That's amazing. Now, can you explain the simple mistakes that doctors make? Because, of course, when you go to the hospital for a migraine or to a doctor, they go straight to triptans or other pharmaceuticals, SSRIs, and why they are not up on some of this more, I'm going to call it, should we call it progressive or alternative medicine, which is very science-based?
Well, some are actually. You'd be surprised. I've worked with many doctors, so we can't say in general that all doctors are bad. There are many who are very curious and can apply the protocol, or if they can't, they contact me and they send their migraine sufferers to me. So that's an alternate solution that they can do. But when you get to the general rules, they have to follow the medical guidelines. And the medical guidelines are based on pharmaceuticals. And if you go to medical school, all the equipment, all the training, nearly everything is paid by and provided by the pharmaceutical companies. And so they can't really say then, okay, so go away pharmaceutical now, here's a migraineur, so let's now use some natural methods and we don't need you anymore. It just wouldn't be possible to arrange that. So I understand it. But the bigger side of it also is that they need evidence. And so I would have to run clinical trials. And so if you're running clinical trials, first of all, you need an ethical board approval. There is no ethical board that would ever admit me to or allow me to use salt, because salt is known to be causing hypertension, correct? And so the main part of my protocol is that migraineurs need more salt. This is important to state up front. And so that immediately cuts off all possibility. But another one is also that in my protocol, once you start using the protocol and you become migraine free, you can basically stop taking all your medications. And so you can really only tell if that the protocol actually works if you have applied it properly for a long time, and then you can taper off the medications and then you remain migraine free. That's the ultimate proof, right? Well, you can't really take people off of medications prematurely. So we're really creating an experiment which may last for 10 days or may last for 5 years. It depends on the person, and it depends on how many medications they've taken. So the ethical board with the difficulty also saying, well, not only are you giving them salt, you're also taking the medications away. And so that would be quite problematic. So I can't really test it. I can't experiment with it. Can't create a clinical trial without running into the bureaucracy that would tell me I can't do these. And so I literally can't run one.
And you also would have to have a group that's not on the protocol, which means you would be asking those people to suffer in a way that you know that they would be suffering. And that's also not ethical. How could you possibly do that? And so the way you collect your research is through a Facebook group, which members can join for free if they commit to reading the book. And they are self-selecting into your data set. And you allowed me to join, even though I'm not a superpowered migrainer. I'm almost sad that I'm not because of these special powers that you all have, but I'm a lurker there and a mother of a migrainer. And so I've learned a lot on how to care for him. And so that is a very powerful data set of people who are self-selecting in and opting into the program, though, don't you think?
It is, but it has a few problems. First of all, everybody who joins is a migrainer. So it's a one-sided story, which I understand for a clinical trial I would have to have. But it would also be important to check if non-migraineurs having headaches time to time would respond the same way. And perhaps that would be a problem. But also, in the group in Facebook, I'm not using my data for research because I consider that to be prying on people who didn't ask for that. I mean, I can't just do research on my own on people who voluntarily join my group. It just doesn't make any sense. And it may be borderline unethical from the sense of research. So I don't do it. But what I do is I'm helping them, and I note it for myself. And I invite doctors into my group. And so I have several hundred doctors and nurses and even surgeons, practitioners in general in my group. And so I allow them to utilize the tools that I provide to the migraineurs. So I am approaching it from a different angle. And then once everybody is migraine free, the proof is in the pudding, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, one of the things, though, I think people are going to say, oh, milk and salt, I can do that. But the one sticking point that's going to be hard for people is realizing that the agricultural diet brought on the advent of migraines. You prove that happened in Egypt. When they moved towards a grain-based diet, we started to get documented cases of migraines. And so really it's a low carbohydrate, no processed food, no sugar, and it's a meat-based diet. And for a lot of people, unfortunately, that's very political or very hard to do in modern society. So can you explain why carbohydrates really are the number one cause of migraines, as you say?
Sure. Well, migraineurs are carbohydrate intolerant, so that doesn't help much. But the problem with carbohydrates really is how glucose enters the cells. And this is written in an it's a medical book, it's a medical manual that is like about 1,000 pages long. It's by Harrison's medical manual, 14th edition. Page 4, they'll explain to you in one simple sentence that as glucose enters the cells, sodium and water leave those cells. And so every time you eat carbohydrate, and it doesn't matter whether it's complex carbohydrate, trash junk food carbohydrate, Coca-Cola or juice or whatever else you want to name, if sugar gets into your blood in larger amount than what it should have, and that's important to state, that you always need glucose in your blood, but you don't need to eat it. It's made by our body. And there's always a little amount of glucose in there. and that's stable. But when you add extra, that glucose has to be removed very quickly because it is inflammatory. It's actually dangerous. And so this is the problem, that it has to be removed. And when it's removed, it plays into cells. And like this manual said, if you have glucose entering cells, sodium and water leave those cells, and sodium is required to run electricity in our brain. That is the main fuel for running action potentials, which then generate everything we do, goes with instructions by our brain. And so that stops if we chase sodium outside of the cell and the water as well, and they end up somewhere in edema, which is very common for migraineurs, then the brain stops working. That's the cause of migraine. Now, the reason why it doesn't cause migraine for everyone, because the same exact thing happens to everybody who eats carbohydrates, is that migraine is genetic. It's a genetic change of the brain. And so this genetic change is very complicated, and I don't want to detail it, but in short, what it is that in the migraine brain, there's a lot more action potentials take place, as we discussed earlier. A lot more energy is used. But how this energy is used is dictated by little connections within the brain, voltage-gated channels and all. These are variants in the migraine brain. They're different. And as a result of that, it is really important to ensure that there's always plenty of sodium where the sodium is needed in the brain. But if carbohydrate is consumed, it's removed. So this is directly the cause of migraine.
Right. And you beautifully explain it in the book, how it's related to insulin production that has to spike in order to get that glucose out of there. So having constantly elevated insulin, I think everybody knows at this point, is a not ideal way to live. And what's interesting, as I was reading, and she has beautiful charts in the book of what's exactly happening, what the danger is if you continue to have migraines on your neurons, and what are the foods that are going to continue to spike your insulin. And it turns out, it's funny because my son hates these things anyway. I could never get him to eat rice. He doesn't like blueberries. He doesn't like raisins. There must be some innate thing in him that he's like, this is not good for me. I'm not going to eat that. And so the things that you do want to eat are things rich in potassium. And, there's a lot of tips in the book. What kind of yogurt, would be good. I didn't know that Greek yogurt was filtered in a way that's maybe not great for you. And so is that maybe the biggest resistance that you get to the Stanton protocol? Because the rest of it's pretty easy, I would say, right?
Actually, no. The biggest resistance I get is for the salt.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
A huge
It's because there's
salt.
this old protocol, this old idea that salt is bad for you. Can you refute that?
Exactly. And every single time, every single day, nearly, there's a new person coming in. I have to explain it from bottom up of what it is. So let me explain what actually causes, why the myth exists and what actually causes hypertension and why salt doesn't. And so the myth exists because it's very easy to misunderstand what salt does. So salt, when you eat salt with food or with water, it doesn't matter at this point, the role of salt is to bring water into the area where the salt is. It will attract water. And so if the salt is in your blood, then the water is going to be attracted and your blood volume is going to increase. Now, an increased blood volume may cause an increased blood pressure if the blood vessels can't dilate. That's called the vasodilation. And today, under the Western diet being so unhealthy, most people end up with inflamed vascular system, and the inflammation prevents the vasodilation. And what causes the inflammation is actually sugar. And this is a very complicated process, but the simplest way to explain is that think of it, if you bruise your hand, what are you going to get on your skin after you bruise it? There's going to be a scab, it's going to be red, it's going to be inflamed, right? You can physically see that it is swollen. Well, when you're eating the wrong things and it damages the inside of your vascular system, your blood vessels, it has the same thing. It's going to end up irritated, red, and swollen. And when it is swollen, it can't dilate anymore, or can't even shrink anymore, can't constrict. So it's pretty much stable. But if you increase then your blood volume in there, it should dilate, but it can't. that's when your blood pressure actually increases. But it wasn't caused by the salt. It was caused by the sugar, by all those bad foods, mixed seed oils, and the carbohydrates together. It's a combination of eating really badly, not getting enough sleep, not getting enough nutrients in your food, not enough vitamins, all this pressure against the cholesterol on medications and all kinds of other medications that you take. These combined cause the inflammation in your arteries. And then if you take salt, yes, your blood pressure is going to go up. But the interesting thing is that there have been oodles of studies to see what happens if they increase or decrease the salt, how much will the blood pressure change? And the blood pressure change is minimal. I mean, if your blood pressure, which is like 120 over 80 is the normal, say you have normal blood pressure and you eat salt, and then it's going to go from 120 to 125 over 85. I mean, it's like really minimal, and it will only stay there for about 10 minutes because your kidneys, if you have healthy kidneys, your kidneys will filter out the excess. So within 10 minutes, your blood volume is going to return to normal. So your blood pressure is going to return to normal. And so it's really a transient phenomenon. It's quite meaningless.
Yes. Yeah. It's just an old paradigm. My father all the time is on me about salt. And I'm like, Dad, that's old research. This is from the 80s, the low carb type craze, so it's a really old entrenched habit to break. So I don't want to give away the rest because I think everyone should read the book themselves. If somebody you love is a migrainer, if you are a migrainer, this is very modern research and it's doable and it comports with everything else that, if you've studied the vegan diet's effect on the body, if you've studied the vegan diet's effect on the planet, if you've studied carbohydrates effect on, all of the things that the mainstream media will not tell you, you're going to find this answers to not just migrainers, but I mean, as a non-migrainer myself, I found some tips as well, such as avoiding Greek yogurt, putting some salt in my water bottle, things like that. So I'm going to encourage everybody to read the book. Follow Dr. Angela Stanton online as well. Again, it's Fighting the Migraine Epidemic, the complete guide, how to treat and prevent migraines without medication. So I was so excited to talk to you. I hope everybody gets something from this. And I'm going to continue to stalk your group on Facebook and I will follow the rules, I promise. Thank you again for letting me in.
Thank you so much for the invitation. It's been a pleasure.